So what is your name?
Angel.
All right, and where do you reside?
I live on the Lower East Side.
All right, and how long have you been living in New York City?
I've lived here since I was born.
All right, and what ethnic persuasion or like race and identity do you identify with?
Chinese American.
All right, and with being Chinese American, have you come across any tribulations and or like confrontations?
I think people like to see Chinese Americans in a certain way, in a certain light, according to stereotypes that have just been put out there by the media and just by society in general. So, of course, being Chinese, there are those assumptions that comes with being Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gotten better as I've entered higher education settings. But when I was younger, it was more difficult.
What stereotypes? Like, if you know,
The really generic ones. Chinese are good at math. Doctors, lawyers. What else have I heard? Smart in general. I'm bad at math. Well, I'm bad at math, so I broke that stereotype. I'm not a doctor or a lawyer, so I've broken all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the really generic ones.
And have you ever like been confronted with these things amongst like your teachers and or peers?
When I was younger, I used to go to schools that did not have Chinese representation, so the only things that they knew about Chinese were their stereotypes that came with them. And that's really what I faced growing up. With teachers, I don't really think, maybe when I was younger and I just didn't realize that those were being put on me, but as I grew up, I'm not aware of any, but it might be, I've just gotten so used to it that I don't notice it anymore.
So how do those stereotypes make you feel though, in general?
It makes me feel like I constantly have to live up to an expectation that is unfair simply because not only are you raising a certain population to be a certain way for those who don't live up to those expectations. It's very depressing. There's a lot of suicide that comes with not being able to live up to those expectations in Chinese culture. And I think for other populations it's unfair as well, simply because they're not expected to do as well, simply because of existing stereotypes.
Yeah. Is there a privilege of being your racial identity?
I think a lot of people see it as a privilege simply because we're viewed as the model minority. But I think when it comes down to it, especially in family settings and in school settings, it's not really a privilege. It's more of a constant expectation that you feel like you have to live up to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, there's like feelings of like unworthiness. And it's not something that is a good feeling. I've done well simply because I've worked really, really hard. But I know that for a lot of other people who cannot live up to those expectations put on them, it does lead to a lot of depressive thoughts.
If there's one thing you could change about other people's perceptions on your racial identity, what would it be?
I don't think I would change the perceptions necessarily. I'd do more to educate them. So for example, the idea that Chinese people have to become doctors and lawyers growing up and that they're all smart, it actually started because of the Chinese Exclusion Act back a long time ago. They would only accept doctors and lawyers coming in from China, and that's really where the expectations arose from. So if they understood really the background of why those stereotypes are in place, it might change their perceptions. I wouldn't necessarily change their perceptions directly, more educate them of how those perceptions came into place.
And final question, you've been doing so many things. What is race in your opinion, and being in New York? What would you like? Oh, let's scratch out the question. Kind of messed up. Would you say that if you educated people more about who you are and who you're more about,